Hello there. Today I'm talking about 10 ways that autistic communication can be misread or misinterpreted by neurotypical people. And number one is facial expressions. And we often hear about autistic people having flat affects, don't we? So a person might not show a whole range of emotions on their face, and they may talk in a very kind of monotone way, but I think many of us have quite exaggerated facial expressions, and I think I'm certainly one of them. And I think this is to do with autistic masking. And I spent much of my younger years looking in the mirror, practicing a whole range of facial expressions, really. And I've noticed through editing my videos on this channel over the last few years that my face will often show a whole range of different kind of facial expressions. It's like my brain is hoping to eventually arrive at the most appropriate facial emotion for whatever it is that I'm talking about. And it's really interesting because I had a conversation about my facial expressions fairly recently with my partner Ian, because he's noted that sometimes I essentially give an angry expression when it's really out of context in terms of what I'm talking about. And as an example, a few weeks ago, I noticed that the freezer door was slightly ajar, and I was, of course, really worried about food in the freezer starting to defrost potentially. So I went off and found Ian, and I just essentially asked him if he'd used the freezer recently because I was really worried about the freezer door being open. And he said that I looked really, really angry at him when actually I wasn't feeling anger. I was just feeling concern, actually. I didn't want our food to defrost, but I just found this really interesting because he said this a few times before, that I looked really angry when anger is essentially not what I'm feeling. But it's yeah, I don't know why this is a go-to expression for me. So it just goes to show that even through years of masking, I still get it wrong in terms of facial expressions. And also, Ian pointed out that after the freezer incidents, I was really, really quiet with him. So this further reinforced the idea that I was really angry with him, but actually I was just trying to process in my head what was happening, really, and whether I would need to throw some food out, or basically just trying to deduce how long the freezer door had been open. So yeah, it's just really interesting that even though Ian has ADHD and he's a neurodivergent person, still I was yeah, misinterpreted at the time. I wasn't angry, I was just concerned. And number two is eye contacts. And differences with eye contact is, of course, really common in autistic people. And I really struggled with eye contacts, particularly when I was a child, because I just didn't know how to meet somebody's gaze and stay there. And it took me a good few years to learn how to make eye contact because I found it just excruciating when I was young, but it's something that I've always had difficulties with, and even now I can only meet somebody's gaze for a few moments, really, because I find that I lose concentration very quickly if I'm talking or if the other person is talking at me. And I guess through a neurotypical lens, I could be showing signs of disinterest when another person is talking because I'm not meeting their gaze. But for me, having averted my eyes is a sign that I am actually really interested in what a person is saying, because it's the only way that I can give my full attention to what's being said at me. And I know that every autistic person has variations in how they deal with eye contacts and differences and difficulties with eye contact. But for me, if I actually want to listen to what you're saying, I have to look away. And number three is having to excuse or remove yourself from social situations in order to self-regulate. So I don't know about you, but I find any kind of social interaction exhausting, and I will need to find ways and strategies to deal with social interactions, particularly if they're over the course of any length of time, such as if somebody comes to your house for a few hours. And I'm thinking in particular of when Ian's mum and sister will come over for dinner, which only happens very occasionally. And I find that I'm kind of okay in talking for a while with them, and it can be enjoyable because they're really lovely people, but I find that I have to excuse myself after a certain amount of time because I just cannot do it anymore. So whenever they come over, I will do all of the washing up, for instance, and I don't mind at all because it means that I can go off to the kitchen and just lose myself in washing up for however long it takes, 15, 20 minutes. And that time to myself to self-regulate is just so important because I just wouldn't be able to sit there for hours and have lots and lots of conversation because I just don't know how to do that these days, if I'm honest. And of course, through a neurotypical lens, this could actually look quite rude, couldn't it? I'm sure some people would think that if they go to somebody's house, they would want their hosts to be completely present and completely emotionally available and to sit there and chat with them for however long they're there. But thankfully, we all have an understanding that I'll just go off to the kitchen and do the washing up. But it's, yeah, that's just one example of how I deal with social interactions these days. And who knew that washing up could be an autistic accommodation? And number 4 is inserting yourself into group conversations. And I've always really struggled with this, and I suspect a lot of autistic people do. And I spoke quite recently in a video about interjecting in a work meeting, or the idea of putting yourself into a group conversation at work. And I've just never known how to do it. It's a skill that I just don't have. So it means that I've not contributed to discussions, even if I thought I had something useful to add. And of course, this could be interpreted by other people in the meeting as not being very interested in the conversation or not having anything useful to say. But very often I would have things that I want to add, but I just wouldn't know how to do it really. I think also in social settings, I've struggled with this again, and I've often in my life been much more of an observer when it's come to group conversations, perhaps over a table, and I would only kind of add something when I knew that there was a clear space for me to be able to do so, like if somebody asked me a direct question. And again, this could come off as being not that interested, or being shy or something like that. So yes, it's an area that I've just always struggled in, and I just don't have the skills to be able to just put myself into group conversations very easily. I think part of it is because I'm sort of analysing everybody at the table, say, and really trying to process what it is that they're saying. And of course, autistic people often need additional processing time, and I often do. So the very fact of interjecting in a conversation when I don't feel 100% ready is, yeah, just way too difficult for me. At number 5 is meltdowns. And I think meltdowns are actually pretty common in autistic people, aren't they? And they could be external meltdowns or internal meltdowns. And for me, I don't actually have too many external meltdowns. I have spoken about the worst one that I think I've ever had in a video previously on meltdowns, but I find that I also can experience meltdowns whenever I deal with customer service agents over the phone. For whatever reason, if I don't feel like the conversation is going the way that I want it to, because being on the phone is quite stressful, isn't it, as an autistic person? Or if I don't feel like I'm expressing myself clearly, this can really easily lead to a meltdown. So I really try and avoid dealing with these kinds of calls these days because it's almost like I can't deal with the amount of adrenaline that my body has going on in that moment, and it absolutely makes me feel dreadful for days. So I think it really is about trying to avoid triggers, or it certainly is for me. But I think also meltdowns can really be misinterpreted by neurotypical people as tantrums, can't they? When actually it's a wholly different experience. I've said before that a tantrum is really when you're invested in a moment and you're trying to get people's attention, and they're of course common in children. Whereas a meltdown is all about trying to get yourself out of a situation. For instance, in a phone call to a customer service agent, I can get really stressed out or even really angry really easily, and I just want the call to be over with. And I feel utterly dreadful about it and often really, really embarrassed. So, yeah, meltdowns and tantrums are two entirely different things. At number 6 is intensity of interests. And of course, I'm talking about autistic special interests here. But I think because of our deep interests, it means that we can talk for hours about them if we want to. And I think this is something that can cause a lot of confusion for neurotypical people because they don't seem to have the same level of interest or concentration on something that, you know, fills us with absolute joy as autistic people. And I know for me, I know that I've bored people whenever I've gone too deep on special interests, but I would rather sit and chat about something that is utterly meaningful rather than talk about, I don't know, whatever it is that other people talk about, really, all the kind of small talk and, you know, what they've been watching on telly and stuff. I would much rather talk about art and illustration or, you know, things that I find genuinely interesting. But I think there's often a kind of mismatch there, isn't there? And let me know if you think that you've bored other people by, yeah, going on about your special interests, because I can utterly relate to that one. At number 7 is being rude or blunt or asking too many questions. And basically, I think we as autistic people are just a bit more direct, aren't we? We just want to avoid all the small talk and get to the actual meat of the matter. And what's wrong with that? It just seems utterly ridiculous to me that we constantly have to filter ourselves in this way, because I just think it's a more pragmatic approach to life in asking questions, and you know, we just need clarity, don't we? And it's just frustrating that this gets misinterpreted as being rude or blunt, because that really isn't the intention. It really is just getting to the root of the matter in the easiest way or the most logical way to us. At number 8 is delays in communication with the phone and email. Basically, I haven't got it in me to respond to people straight away. Generally speaking, anyway, I need time to sit with something and to think about it and to formulate a response in my brain. It just doesn't come instantly to me, or very, very often anyway. And for me, it's even more difficult whenever it's come to kind of social relationships or friendships, because I find it just really difficult to be able to respond to people quickly. And I've always struggled with the phone. So for me, email and text message has been easier, but even still, I just will leave somebody on read for ages and ages, and it gets to the point where I think, you know, it's so uncomfortable a thought even to respond to this person now. So it's yeah, led to the end of many friendships for me, because I've just not been able to respond to people. And I'm sure this behaviour has been really misinterpreted actually by friends in the past, because I haven't wanted to behave like this, but I guess it could be seen as ghosting them, or, you know, just really trying to phase them out of my life. But that wasn't my intention. I think that certainly happened as a consequence of not responding to messages. But yeah, absolutely, it's not what I wanted to happen. But my brain just doesn't know any other way in how to cope with these kinds of communications. And I'm going to add something else to this one because it is a similar thing or a similar behaviour. But whenever I see somebody I know on the streets or in a supermarket, because my brain isn't wholly prepared in that moment to talk to them, I will do whatever I can to hide from them because I just can't cope with the pressure. And I don't doubt that this could be seen as being a bit of an odd behaviour by my friends if they were to see me, you know, physically going off to hide. But again, if I'm not fully prepared to talk to somebody whenever I see them, I just can't do it. It's just too difficult for me. And number 9 is laughing at inappropriate moments. And I'm laughing now while I'm doing this. This is something that I've always struggled with. And if you've been watching my channel for any length of time, you'll know that I do this weird kind of chortle thing while I'm talking, but I don't know any other way. And I've always been like it. And it can get worse with the more kind of serious topics that I'm talking about. It's at some levels some kind of emotional dysregulation going on. And yeah, it's just what my brain's decided to do. And I'm thinking of a moment when I worked for a charity, and my boss had told me that somebody that we both knew fairly well had died, and I burst out laughing because I don't know, it's what my brain decided to do in the moment. And of course I was utterly mortified about it soon afterwards, but I'm so grateful that my boss was really understanding, and she knew and understood actually all of my quirks. And I do now wonder if you know, she's neurodivergent as well, because she did really understands my behaviours, thankfully. But yeah, I just have these weird behaviours at times, and I just can't control them at all. I'd love to know if you can relate. And at number 10 is cancelling plans. And I've done this throughout all of my life, and very often it will be last minute, and very often as well it's stuff that I actually really want to do. I've spoken before about how I really like the comedian Stuart Lee, and I know Neil Autistic Not Alien talks about how much he likes Stuart Lee as well. But I remember getting in from work one evening, and I was due to go to see Stuart Lee with Ian, and I said to him, I just can't go. And this was before I knew I was autistic. So Ian was really confused as to why I was cancelling, because I didn't have any real excuse, I guess, other than to say I just can't do it. I just don't feel able to. And he thankfully was able to go with his sister, and they had a great night. So I was grateful about that, because it meant that Ian was still able to go, but I just wasn't able to put the words to how I was feeling, really. But of course I now have the language now that I know I'm autistic. But yeah, just sometimes a social situation would arrive and I'd think, you know what, I just can't do this, and back out, as I say, at the last minute very often. But yeah, it's just really difficult, and particularly if it's something that you really want to do, but your executive function says otherwise. So there we have it. There are 10 ways that autistic communication can be misread or misinterpreted by neurotypical people, and I'm sure there are very many more. So leave your examples down below, and I'd love to know if you can relate to any of the examples I've given in today's video. So thank you for watching. Give it a like if you got this far. Comments would always be appreciated, and if you don't know what to say, leave an orange heart down below for friendship. And yeah, I'll see you again soon.